the Let's All Be Friends chat.
Oh, but unfortunately, I can do about it since I've been being freaked out.
Dude, I have
Roasted.
homework. I don't know what to do with myself.
That
I'm
is
gonna
Oh,
go
wow,
home and read a
lucky
book,
you.
but I don't have homework. I hate you.
Dude,
Look
I
at
have
all
just
these
like
problems
this is my
I
hobby
have.
of the month.
Okay, dude, I don't know, because Profane just, like, gave us just time to, like, work on stuff that apparently most people haven't finished, but, like, all of them were due earlier in the year. Like, these were assignments that should have already been done. So, like, I was already done.
I know. I can't believe this tragic situation that Lily's finding.
I never said it was tragic.
Oh,
I just
well,
said
there's
I had
motivation behind
10
it.
minutes of your prep time to use, and I chose to use it playing Endless Lane.
Judging so hard.
I mean, now I won't play again probably for like 2 or
Thank you.
Cram that into some semblance of order.
All right. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Like, I gave you, like, a very vague direction and told you to find stuff on it, so.
I found lots of stuff for myself, though, so.
That's good. That's what we really needed. Okay. Is everyone ready? Awesome. I strongly affirm today's resolution that the influx of upper income groups to urban areas does more harm than good. So just setting up the framework, this is going to be a fact round, so the affirmative must prove that the influx of upper income groups to urban areas does more harm than good to win, and the negation must prove the opposite, that the influx of these people does more good than harm in order to win. So just some definitions. So upper income groups, people who earn more than $250,000 a year, are harm is like having an adverse effect, good, beneficial effect. And our criterion is, I'm just going to say net benefits. Net benefits, the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. You good with that? I don't know what that means, so I'm just going to move on to the case. So our first contention is about health. All right. So the CDC warns that the influx of upper income groups causes displacement, and so that causes a lot of different severe health effects. So, for instance, an increase in cancer rates, an increase in birth defects, an increase in infant mortality, and increased incidence of asthma, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. And also, there's increased exposure to hazardous substances like lead paint. Can I finish this first? Sure. And the reason why all these things increase is because people tend to be displaced, right? They get pushed out of these neighborhoods because you can't at some point, you can't fit in any more people into these neighborhoods. So some have to move out. And what happens with the influx of upper income groups is that property value increases. So people who are poor can't afford it anymore, so they have to move out. So that means that when they get displaced, they have less access to affordable housing. They have less access to healthy food choices or good transportation choices, and less access to bicycle and walking paths, exercise facilities, lots of stuff like this, and less access to healthcare as well. So that's why we see these increase in health problems, and that means that the impacts here we see. A lower quality of life, right? Because due to this lack of healthcare and decreased health, and that means that there's decreased dehumanization. There's more dehumanization happening to people who are actually pushed out of these areas. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. So let's move on to the second contention about how it doesn't affect the neighborhoods that actually need it. So the poorest and most vulnerable neighborhoods actually remain poor because the influx of upper income groups goes to neighborhoods that are considered good enough, but the neighborhoods that are actually really poor and actually need it, they're not chosen to develop. And so for every gentrified neighborhood, 10 others remained poor according to implicit economics. And we see that this also especially disadvantages racial minorities. According to a Harvard study, the development of neighborhoods where upper income groups would move into, it continues for neighborhoods with over 35% white residents, and either slows or stops if the neighborhood is 40% black. Because we see that gentrifiers actually prefer already white areas. So this only increases racial segregation and racial inequality, because we see that some areas get lifted up, but the others still remain poor, and they get more disadvantaged. And we see that so once again, displacement plays a factor in here as well. That when white people like have moved into historically black neighborhoods, then black people are pushed out, and they have to go to the poorer neighborhoods instead. So racial segregation and inequality increases when we have this influx of upper income groups. That means that overall, like, the quality of life decreases the quality of life that doesn't increase for these neighborhoods, it actually decreases, right? We see that the income inequality gap only widens, and especially along racial lines. So that means that there's that like the dehumanization really increases. That's the main impact of today's round, is that of dehumanization for people who get displaced, or for people who never even see the impact of like development or the movement in of upper income groups into their neighborhoods. Okay. The third contention is about housing. Homelessness. Yeah. Okay. So we see that the influx of like upper income groups leads to a loss of single room occupant dwellings, and that leads to homelessness because people literally can't afford their apartments anymore. So they're pushed out onto the streets, or if they can eat, because they can't find cheap enough housing. Okay. The last affordable housing in big cities. Yeah. Okay. In 2000. Okay. A 5-year period. Okay, in a 5-year period from 2005 to 2010, rent in the most economically depressed areas of New York. Okay, not limited to places like Brownsville. Okay, rent in the most economically depressed areas of New York, like including, but not just, including places like Brownsville, we see that the rent increased 22% while the median wages dropped, and we see that the number of homeless shelters increased. The number of families in homeless shelters increased, and actually 5% of the population was in a homeless shelter at the end of this 5-year period due to like the influx of these upper income groups due to gentrification. We see that renters are really the most vulnerable to this shift, and we see that they're disproportionately minorities. You can look to the historic example of redlining to see that minorities are literally pushed out of these areas in order to make way for like rich white upper income groups. So the percentage of urban homes that have gone to the from the bottom half of the home price distribution to the top half, what is this for? Like, is this just like
stats showing that like housing prices are rising?
Oh,
and that it's not just averaging out. It's like literally the bottom half is moving to the top.
Okay, so what happens when these upper income groups move into urban areas is that the prices of those homes increase dramatically, and we see that's true for across the nation. And that their prices like move from the bottom half of the price distribution all the way to the top, and that means that the people who were living in these homes before literally can't afford them anymore. We see that in Boston, it's the percentage has increased to 61%. That the percentage of urban homes that's like increased is 61%. In Seattle, it's 55%. In New York City, it's 46%. San Francisco, it's 42%, and Washington, D.C., 35%. So this is a national problem. It's not just limited to one area, but we see that overall, like, the influx of these upper income groups greatly increases the prices of this, like, a significant amount of the prices of urban homes. And that means that people are getting pushed out of their homes. They either have, like, go homeless, or they have to move to poorer neighborhoods in order to actually find housing. That means that overall, once again, the impact is dehumanization because people lose their homes. Like, they have to live on the street or go to homeless shelters in order to find shelter. So for these reasons, I strongly affirm today's resolution. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. Or keys first. Okay, that'd be nice. Sounds good. One bottle? Sure. Yeah.
Right. Is everybody ready?
Sorry. Wait, actually, I want to get my phone too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is that reputation?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I'm going to be going neck case, then app case. Cool. So with that, I'm going to start my time. We strongly negate the resolution the influx of upper income groups to urban areas does more harm than good. So our first contention is that about gentrification in low-income neighborhoods. So according to CNN, we see that the gentrification often brings increased economic development in what used to be low-income neighborhoods. For example, they point out that new job opportunities open, and we see that with more commerce and more business coming because of wealthier people, it also leads to higher property values. And according to CNN, the credit scores of poor residents often improve because of that by 8%. We see that with new commerce and with more money, this often pretty much a boost in the economy and boost a neighborhood that used to have pretty much no resources. And also with a higher tax base, this leads to more money to spend in certain areas. When we look to our subpoint of better city services, so basically what we see here is that without gentrification, what we would have is just concentrated poverty, pretty much an area which has an overall which is overall impoverished. And what this means is that the government can pretty much just ignore it, and there's a low tax base, which means that there isn't enough to fund services such as water, other public services like health, and also education, which is huge. Because without a good education, people are just stuck in that cycle of poverty. But what we see here is that with gentrification, this leads to more property taxes and with higher commerce. Overall, that's more money for the city or whatever area. And also this means that there's more money to be spent in local administration, schools, and police. According to 2008 Duke University study, they found the greatest income gain and gentrification were blacks with high school diplomas. Pretty much what we see here is that the impact of this is that a higher tax base and more city services means that there's a higher quality of life, because with more resources, especially those of education, this means that people can find a way to get out of poverty and overall have a higher income, which is good for their families as well as young people's futures. So when we look at our previous point of low-income neighborhoods, pretty much again the impact of the higher quality of life, because with more commerce and with more economic opportunities and jobs, also this means more money for people's families, higher quality of life. Okay, our second contention is that of safety. So what we see here is that according to NPR, gentrification often has effect on crime rates and often leads to a decrease. What we see here is that because of the fact that we have more higher income people moving into a certain neighborhood, which leads to commerce and business and more opportunities and basically more money, it often means that there's less of, for people who are desperate, there's less of a need to commit a crime. And moreover, the government is focused on this area because of their economic gain, economic standing. Maybe if we look at an example of Rio de Janeiro, pretty much this is like a good example of gentrification. There's this area in the favelas, and I'm gonna hurry. Okay, pretty much the rich people moved near the neighborhood, and because of as a result, there's more tourism, more money was spent there, and pretty much the government even focused on this area because they wanted to make sure it was safe and keep having economic gains. According to the National Criminal Justice Reference Journal, and within the space of 14 years, New York, San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, Washington, D.C. all saw reduced crime rates because of gentrification. Okay, and the impact of this is higher quality of life, because less crime means more safety for people, and more safety means a higher quality of life because people can go about and do their business and not have to worry about crime being committed against them. Okay, reputation. So pretty much to refute their health contention, they're pretty much their only link was that they have all of these adverse impacts because people have to move. And this isn't true because, as we've already shown to you through logic, is that more economic opportunities and more jobs means that people don't have to move, and overall people want to stay because of the fact that they have a chance to have a better economic living. And they also talk about less facilities. Again, this isn't true because with a higher tax base and with more money in the city, this means more facilities and city services are available to the citizens. Okay, their second contention on poor neighborhoods. They talked about, so pretty much what we see here is that this actually helps poor neighborhoods because, again, with more economic opportunities, more commerce, more jobs, more spending, this overall boosts economy in poor neighborhoods, and it's especially good because it brings more education, like it improves the school system and helps low-income children especially get out of that cycle of poverty. And there's also more, I think they talked about racial segregation. Okay, we're going to go to the last contention pretty much on renters. And I talked about basically our renters are adversely being affected. Okay, gentrification, so what we see here is that because of so long time we see that this their contention about renters being pushed out is basically this. Pretty much. I'm gonna go back to the second contention because I have more stuff to say. Wait, dude, I should probably do the third contention. Okay, third contention, renters. They are not hurt because pretty much what we see is that homeowners aren't hurt because of the fact that their home values go up, and there are zoning laws that provide for subsidized housing, and two, because of economic opportunities and because of often higher incomes, it means that this effect isn't happening. Oh my god, I was going too slow.
Okay.
It's been a while.
It is time to party, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh wow, that was pretty bad, but that's okay.
We are going to go bananas.
Yes. In a good way.
Yeah, like good bananas. Like all your potassium for the day right here. All right. So, is everybody ready for this totally tubular speech?
Cool. Do we have an order?
I was just neg out so you can blow up all the stuff in the midst.
Yeah. Sounds like it's time for a fiesta.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, there's siesta.
Yeah, kind of. I promise you though,
Gonna
my
be
speech
weird.
is not going to be a snooze. I'm going to make it as spicy and exciting as possible because
Nice.
I have a lot to say. Okay, no, but for real, are we ready? Cool. Time starts now. So I strongly affirm today's resolution, and let's start by addressing my opponent's first contention. Which was basically the resolution. Their taglines kind of sucked, FYI.
Yeah.
Anyways, they talk about how it brings an increased economic development and all this other good stuff, but the question that must be asked is for whom? Notice the for whom because I'm grammatically correct. For whom are these economic gains being seen? And the problem is that all of these economic gains are going directly to these upper income groups which are moving into the neighborhoods. If you take the overall gains as an aggregate, as an average, what you're doing is all you're saying is, wow, there's a lot of rich people in this neighborhood now. That does not mean that the poor people became rich. It just means that there are rich people now because they just moved in. It is logic, Judge. That is how math works. Great. And then they talk about higher property values and how this is all super bueno. But the problem is as my partner brought up in her speech, and they never responded to, people of color are disproportionately less likely to own their houses due to historic institutional racism, which prevented them from being able to purchase homes then. Even today, black applicants in Seattle are 2.56 times more likely to be denied a conventional mortgage loan than white applicants. So there is still a problem today when it comes to black families trying to own their own homes. So when you look at the increasing property values, this is all fine and dandy, except it disproportionately benefits white families at the expense of families of color. And that's a theme we're going to be seeing again and again throughout today's debate. And as we've been arguing so far, this is even worse because this leads to dehumanization of these families of color. Great. So they talk again about credit scores. It's totally marginal, and it doesn't matter because people are being forced into homelessness. So if you have a great credit score while homeless, more power to you, I guess. And they talk about increased city services and how the government can't just ignore it now that there are white people being affected. Okay, that doesn't solve the root problem, which is that these displaced people are not getting access to these services. The thing is that as more and more people are coming and willing to pay more and more, people cannot afford to live in the places where they have always lived, so they move elsewhere. So yes, you might see increased city services for the people who live there, but the question is, who are these people? And these people are, again, these upper income groups. And so we're not actually seeing an increase because people with lots of money are going to do pretty well no matter where they are because that's how money works. So you're not actually seeing more good being created by gentrification because you need to look to the populations that are being negatively affected. Again, they keep on trying to place purely economic judge. Not let them tell you that it is purely economic because of the role that racism has played in shaping our country. Your race affects a lot, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of access to things like mortgages that Black applicants have been denied since, mortgages existed? Mortgages not existed.
You don't know.
Okay, since the history of mortgages. Great. Again, they keep on talking about all these stats, but they have no statistics that prove that these gains are going to families who originally lived there. And because they do not provide one single statistic which proves this is all fine and dandy, but it does not apply to the fact that we need to look at everybody, not just how rich people are going to do which things really richly. Whatever. Second contention, that of safety. They talk about crime rates are often decreased, and it has big impact. Okay, yeah, it sure does, because gentrification actually increases crime. When they look at these overall trends, what they're seeing is that across the country, crime rates have been falling, and that's great. But what they don't look at is that gentrification actually leads to unexpected spikes in things like robbery in places like Baltimore and New York, because now that there are more rich people, it is even more lucrative to be a robber. Because, oh my God, all of a sudden you have a bunch of rich people to rob. Isn't that wonderful? It is incredibly more profitable. They are incentivizing robbery. They are making a life of crime that much more attractive. Furthermore, because there are a lot of new people in the neighborhood, there's increased anonymity and there's weaker social ties. It's easier for criminals to blend in. You don't know who anybody is because a bunch of new people just moved in. So because of that, it's harder for community to actually self-police and go, wow, that's a suspicious dude trying to break into my neighbor's house. Is that my new neighbor? Is that a criminal? Who knows? Nobody knows because gentrification. Great. Let's move into the case of the affirmation.
Oh wait, no, Rio de Janeiro.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they talk about the favelas. The problem is that the favelas are like the slums service, so like rich people are moving in, they're moving nearby, and a lot of this policing was done for stuff like the Olympics and other sporting events that were going on in Rio de Janeiro. So the thing is that none of that was actually happening, and it again was not addressing the root concern, which is that the government was only willing to serve the rich people, and that sucks.
Okay.
Oh yeah, shoot. Alright, first contention, health. The only thing they address this is by talking about on our links that actually there are more opportunities and there are more facilities. Again, the question is for whom? This is the only thing that they address. They claim that there is logic here, but in fact there isn't a lot of logic if you look at how it actually plays out in the real world. They just concede way too much on increased cancer, infant mortality, birth defects, asthma, and all this stuff, which is actually going to happen. Because of course there's going to be better facilities, but these better facilities are going to people who have had good facilities this whole time. Yeah. Right. Second contention, that it doesn't affect the people who need it most. And they talk about how more spending helps lower income children. Again, the lower income children are not living in these places anymore because they cannot afford it. This just does not respond at all. Yeah, and again, they're ignoring the whole problem of racism and gentrification, that the second you see 40% or more African American population in a neighborhood, the risk that neighborhood is gentrified decreases, and that is because, surprise, surprise, people who have lots of money and are just seeking to get good stuff for themselves aren't the most socially conscious, nice people. Great. Third contention, homelessness. They talk about how the home belongs to them while simultaneously ignoring our whole point on the historic lack of access to home ownership on the part of minorities. So the problem is that the home only belongs to the white people in the area. So again, we're seeing disproportionate gains for white people at the expense of families of color. They say it isn't happening. Well, great, that's not a refutation because it totally is. So as we're seeing increased displacement, which has tragic effects for the families of increased cancer, infant mortality, blah, blah, blah. We're seeing increased homelessness, and of course, all this is happening with like masses of racism just oozing out.
Okay. I mean, all they said is zoning laws provide subsidized
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, zoning laws provide subsidized housing, except, again, problem is the lack of home ownership. They ignore the critical facts of the situation, which involve taking a intersectional view of the United States history, and that's really important today, so that's the end of my time. Okay, that was incredibly disorganized, but hey. I finished
Time management.
See, if I could time manage, I wouldn't even be here right now. I'd be like doing homework.
Or you'd be done if you're okay.
Oh my god.
I did not sign up for these personal attacks.
I mean, I got roasted earlier. It's only
I didn't sign up for this.
We're only allowed to roast you. That's how it works.
That's how that
You
works.
can't roast us.
What?
I'm a minor under your care. This adult figure is preying upon me. I'm an adult.
Okay, so the order is going to be neg case, then aft case. Sounds like a plan. Everyone ready?
We are good.
Okay. Time starts now. I strongly negate today's resolution that the influx of upper income groups to urban areas has done more harm than good. So going straight into the negation case, our first contention was that of benefits to low income neighborhoods. We specifically talked about increased economic advantages brought by opportunities for more commerce by the construction of things like retail stores, grocery stores within walking distance, construction and development of new businesses, which in turn increases property values. We've seen that credit scores have gone up as a result, leading to an overall boost in the economy and a higher tax base. The affirmative comes up here and tries to claim that these gains are disproportionate and that the gains are only for the rich and that minorities are unlikely to share in this, but this is simply not true because everyone is benefiting from this increase in development because first we see more jobs, especially in construction and then in actual employment of retail services and other upscale shops. We see that property value of these areas increases, which means that people who do own homes have a better, have higher value property, but
Yes. So if property value increases, does the rent also increase?
yeah, the rent also increases, but people who do pay rent still have access to better services in terms of things like accessible retail shops and access to better city facilities. So they try to claim that minorities don't share in on the gains afforded by economic advancement, but look to our second subpoint on better city services, how this is specifically going to lead to more funding for education, which means that, and when we increase funding for education, it's minorities and people of low income that benefit most from this. You can look to a 2008 Duke University study, which found that the greatest income gain in gentrified areas were places where found that the greatest income gain in gentrified areas were blacks with high school degrees, with high school diplomas rather than whites with college degrees. This shows that people of minorities are the ones who are benefiting most from this because of the economic advancement and opportunity that this provides. Now, and we talk about how better city services means that we don't have concentrated poverty anymore. It means that the government can actually do something about this because there's a greater tax base, leading to a greater quality of life and less poverty. Now, they try to claim that this doesn't solve the root of displaced people and they don't get benefits and these benefits don't apply to everyone. They keep talking about displacement in their case and in responding to ours, so let's take a look at displacement. So we see that long-time residents are actually going to be staying because gentrification, the process of upper-income groups moving, brings socioeconomic benefits in terms of economic advancement, more jobs, more access to facilities, shops, utilities, as we've mentioned before. The Washington Post found that the chance of displacement in New York when it was gentrified was 1.3% for any household. The Philadelphia Federal Reserve found that income did not predict displacement rates at all in 2015. There was no correlation. And a 2008 census data study by CNN found that there was no evidence of displacement of the poor in 2008. So you see that this displacement that they keep talking about simply does not occur because even if and the price of rent increases, people have access to more economic opportunities, which means that they're able to earn more. They have access to better facilities, which means that it's more profitable for them to stay there, even if prices of rent goes up. Additionally, you can extend what my partner said before about how zoning laws force people to build subsidized housing, which solves for the harms of rent increasing. So our second contention was that of safety, where we talked about how, according to the NPR, gentrified neighborhoods have lower crime rates because more rich people means that there's more commerce, there's less of an incentive to commit crime when there's more economic advancement, and the government's actually focusing resources to make this a safe neighborhood. So they talk about how gentrification increases crime because robbery is easier. This doesn't actually respond to the fact that we talk about how there are lower crime rates because there's less of an incentive to commit crime. Even if people find it easier to rob and it gets more profitable, there are additional crime-fighting resources directed to this particular neighborhood because it's more profitable.
Neighborhoods with more taxes have higher police.
Because these neighborhoods have a higher tax base and because they're more profitable, more police forces are directed there. So these areas are more safe, leading to an increased quality of life for people living there. So now going on to AFCASE, their first contention was that of health, where they pretty much talked about how displacement would lead to tons of health problems. Extend what my partner said about how more economic opportunities means that people want to stay. Extend what I said before about how displacement has been statistically proven to be not significant, how displacement, even if it does occur, is not huge because zoning laws force people to build subsidized housing anyway, and because people don't want to move out because they have access to tons of great facilities and utilities and opportunities that they wouldn't have elsewhere even if rent goes up. Because displacement doesn't occur, this means that they have no other link to their health problems that they talk about. So we see that these benefits are for everyone. No one is being displaced, and people's health is actually going to increase because access to increased facilities means things like access to increased healthcare, standard, fully functioning hospitals, things like that, which means that people will actually be seeing better health. So going on to their second contention about people remaining poor, this was pretty much talking about how racial inequality would continue because people only go to neighborhoods that are already kind of white. Yeah, kind of white. The thing is that the resolution talks about gentrification directly doing harm. The thing is, gentrification doesn't cause people who are poor to stay poor. They're already poor. Gentrification, if anything, it does something to bridge the gap we have between the rich and poor, even if it is only by just a bit. So even if the neighborhood is 35% black and white people move in, this still helps end racial segregation. We still have people moving in. You can look to our Duke University study about how blacks benefit the most from this. We see that more educational and economic opportunity means that we have less racial inequality. So now going on to their third contention of homelessness. Stop it. You can extend what we said before about how displacement is statistically not true.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's so important to compensate as my two voters.
Yeah. Do you want me to do the whole
Does y'all
thing
think
right
you
now?
want me to say something? I will try my best to be concise and clear, and I'll do a good speech on this.
Cool.
Alright.
It's like half of this page. I just try to outline.
Okay. Could I have the sheet on the econ? Thanks. Alright. So for my speech, I'm just gonna go over the two voter issues, and okay. So is everybody ready?
So, do you guys so ready?
Oh yeah, okay. Now, so time starts now. As the final speaker of the mitigation, I strongly lead today's resolution. So going on to first voter issue, which is that of economy. So what has come up in this round is pretty much the affirmation that's consistently tried to claim that gentrification does not help lower income people, and more importantly, just all the money just goes back to the rich people. But as we have shown through the statistics and evidence, pretty much the movement of rich people or people with money to lower income neighborhoods pretty much stems and sparks boost in the economy. What we have seen, according to our CNN sources, pretty much there are more jobs in sectors such as construction and retail services, as well as with these more employments also lead to higher income. It leads to more income gain by residents, and pretty much what we see. And also what we see here is that with new jobs and new opportunities and access to better services, overall leads to a better quality of life and pretty much economic gain for these people. And this is huge because what we see is that people who otherwise wouldn't have access to such resources or to jobs beforehand now have it because of gentrification. Because the money moved to the area where they are living, they have the opportunity to have more incomes, more jobs, and pretty much a better economy. And this is also extremely important when we go into our subpoint, which is that about services. As my partner has explained, pretty much what we see here is that higher retail services means, more money means a higher tax base, and higher tax base is extremely key because taxes pretty much fund public administration, police, schools, and this is all extremely important because when we look to education especially, this directly helps, this is another way that it directly helps lower income children. You look to a 2008 study about Blacks with high school diplomas getting the most. This is exactly the type of benefit that gentrification provides. Because what we see here is that with a better education and because of higher tax services, this is extremely key in providing for a better economic status for many of these families. Okay. And overall, with the higher quality of life because of more economic gains and people being able to provide for their family, this is extremely important to use around. Okay, so to go on to safety. Pretty much, as my partner has pretty much adjust their reputations, but if we look to our contention, what we see here is that safety has been shown to increase lower crime rates due specifically to gentrification. Even though they try to mention more robberies because there's more rich people, this doesn't adjust the fact of a decreasing trend overall in cities. They've completely missed our study by the National Criminal Justice Reference Security from 1970 to over this time frame in New York, San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, Washington, D.C. So what we see here is that this is which is directly caused by gentrification. Pretty much what we see here is that with more money, with more commerce, it means specialized attention from the government, and also more money from a tax base means more money for police officers, for security forces in a city, pretty much bringing an increase in security and safety. And safety is important because what we see here is when people can go out and have their livelihoods, can go to their jobs, not have to worry about being robbed or even worse. This means overall it's a happier society and a society where where safety isn't and overall safety and for these reasons and because of a higher quality of life due to safety, for these reasons I strongly negate.
Not going to weigh impact.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry, I'm
I have like 20 seconds left to do it, so.
yeah, okay. Honestly, at this point, I think I should just sit down because I'm kind of out of it today, as you probably can tell.
Christie, you just like the fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just so out of that.
That's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I wrote it down, but like, I think you already have it there.
Okay. Just tell me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll do that.
Oh boy, this is not. Okay, I'm just gonna organize this in order.
Ooh, organize things in order. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Grace, the first half of the first sentence is for you. Okay. In this debate about trickle-down urban development, the affirmation is clearly winning. At the point point where the negation team concedes the analysis that I make in my first speech about like the most poor and vulnerable neighborhoods are never targeted by gentrification, and that gentrification actually increases displacement, the affirmative is going to be controlling all of the impacts in today's round. So for this voter speech, I have two voting issues, that of like the economic and health and like crime impacts of gentrification, and then the second one would be about the racial role, the role of institutional racism that in gentrification. Okay. So the negation team talks a lot about how there's a lot more economic opportunities, how there's more money for these areas, how like property values are going to increase. But when they say all of these things, like they completely ignore that like the stuff that my partner says, my partner says in her speech about how this doesn't mean that the poor become rich. They try to claim that everyone benefits, but this is just false. Now, they say themselves that property value increases, and they acknowledge that rent increases as well. That means that people can't afford to live in these areas now because the rent is just too high. You can look to our third contention where we specifically tell you that like that there's an increase of like people and families going to homeless shelters because they just can't afford their housing anymore, right? There's a 5%, there's 5% of the population actually is in these homeless shelters, right? And then we also see that renters really are the most vulnerable when rent increases, that directly targets these populations. So there's not really an economic benefit for the people who need it. The economic benefit is only going to the people who are already rich and who are moving into these areas, not the people who were there before. Now, okay, so looking at the idea of displacement. So what the negation team said that, well, longtime residents actually stay in these areas. However, the majority of the poor actually aren't long-time residents. Because of this lack of financial stability, they are moving between neighborhoods. There's really, they have less of an ability to actually get these gains, the economic gains that the negation is talking about. Once these upper income groups move in, they're the poor to move out because they don't have the financial stability that they need, and gentrification doesn't provide that economic stability that they need. Okay. Going on to crime, they bring up like some 1970 study about like New York and Boston, right? But that's like part of a trend where there's a nationwide drop in crime. It's not directly correlated with gentrification. There's a lot of other different causes that I'm not going to name because then they're going to call it a point of order. Okay. So like there's decrease in crime that they talk about, and this really important piece of evidence that they have that you can just disregard that entirely. Looking at the second voting issue, which is the role of institutional racism in gentrification. So they don't really touch on this idea at all. They kind of just say that like this isn't true, that it's not happening, right? Like that we're actually going to be helping poor neighborhoods and like improving the school system and stuff. They pretty much just ignore the fact that like racial segregation is worsened by this. You can look to the history of redlining, where blacks were basically pushed out of their own neighborhoods so like white people could move in and get more money, right? And then you can also look at the third contention where we talk about how renters are disproportionately minorities, and they're the most vulnerable to gentrification. They're the ones who are actually hurt by this. Their refutation about subsidized housing like doesn't really matter in the end because there's still a lack of home ownership for minorities. And the reason for this is, well, yeah, that's, okay. Basically the point is they ignore the whole point about racism. And that means that it stands as pretty much unrefuted in today's debate because all they say is it's not happening, but they're not opening their eyes and looking at the world around them because it is happening. I hate to tell you this, but it's happening. Okay. And you can look to our Harvard study where we specifically say that like gentrification doesn't even happen if there's like 40% or more black people, right? They prefer already white areas. And then like, yeah.
Further deeply entrenches racism within our society.
You know? So that further like deeply entrenches racism within our society. We see that rather than getting better and bridging the gap, as their members of opposition says, like in her speech, it doesn't bridge the gap, it widens the gap. It just gets bigger. I don't know where you're getting like this. It's bridging the gap, but like, let me tell you, it's not from reality, okay? So because we control these really big impacts, you're going to be voting for the affirmative team in today's round. Thank you.
Ladies, hand motions. I don't even know what to say. I believe I can